Hello everyone and welcome to rural Germany. It's been a while since the last video, but I'm finally back and hopefully back with weekly uploads as well. And in today's video we are finishing off the area alongside of the river and we're making good progress on starting another area. We're starting, as you can see, with removing some forests and adding another farmland on a hill, and we will be building 2 villages this episode, 1 small settlement and 1 bigger town. More about them later in the episode. Over here we are using network multi-tool to slope the roads and the railway. So usually I don't use the mod, but I got it for adding barriers alongside of the highways because of the parallel option, and I figured I would just try out the slope function as people were saying that it was better than the move it one. This does not mean that I'm going to build my interchanges or any other roads or train lines with network multi-tool, because I still find it really fun to do it myself, and what would be the fun for you guys to just watch me mess around with network multi-tool instead of building my own interchanges. Today I'll be using a few different techniques to create farm fields. The first technique is by using the oil and ore texture, which I downloaded a map theme for that converts the oil and ore texture to farm field textures. I also use tire track decals to add a secondary way of creating farm fields, so the farm fields can vary a bit more in how they look. This makes it a bit more realistic. The fields that we just built arose when the main road over here got built, as this was a pretty accessible part of the hill because of that same main road. The farmers weren't allowed to expand further in the forest to protect the forests and the wildlife. We will build hills that are completely covered in those farm fields, because that is also pretty common in this area. But as already stated earlier in this series, the first hill range after the river is and will be mainly forests and not farm fields. Here we are starting to build the first of the 2 rural villages that we're going to build in this episode. This is going to be a really small settlement, pretty similar to the one we built in episode 5 that got completely ruined by the highway, although this one still owns its farm fields and it's even more in the middle of nowhere. So as you probably would have guessed, this town makes all its money by farming, although it's not a lot of money because there's a bigger town that we're going to build that has way more farm fields. So it's not the richest of towns, and it also has almost 0 tourists. A part of people that really want to find the nature, then it's a really good spot to start your walking trip, and they don't have any shops either. So all in all, they are highly dependent on the second town of today, which will be a lot bigger. We're now going to detail this town, so I'll leave you guys with a very short detailing time lapse. So we're starting the second town of today. As mentioned earlier, this is going to be a pretty large town. You could compare it to Erstendorf. It's a bit smaller, but not by a lot. This is going to be the center town of the area that is not directly near the river, and will consist mainly of farming. For the road design, we have 3 main roads coming into one roundabout in the middle of the town. One of them, the main road to Erstendorf. The second one, the main road that leads to Boorzee and further, so basically the main road before the highway got built. And the third one leading to the farmlands behind the town. So over here we're just placing a bunch of houses to see which houses I wanted to use in this town, but for the actual detailing and real placement of the houses we are going to divide this town in 5 pieces. The first one being the center with the church and the shops, and then we have 4 areas between the roads around the center. I ended up adding too many roads around the town center, but we're going to use some of them for farm fields. So not all the empty areas between the roads are going to be part of the town, just the 4 central ones. Now that I'm editing this, I see that I actually didn't start with the central area. That will probably come after this residential detailing is my guess. I just remembered it incorrectly. So the process for this residential detailing is pretty simple. I first mark with fences what the gardens will be, then I add concrete along the streets or bushes, depends on what I want to do, and then I go on with placing trees, grass, bushes, chairs and umbrellas, and sometimes a goalpost here and there or some other detailing. Another really important part, which you also saw in the other town, is adding stains to the concrete on the more rural places. As the towns aren't that rich, they probably wouldn't fix up their concrete that much. So in this video I'm also using a lot of stain decals and other wear decals just to make the town look a bit more realistic. So now we're finally starting on the city center. We're adding 2 food stores over here, as this is a somewhat bigger town. This place with the parking lot used to be the old marketplace, and is still being used as a market once a week, the parking lot then. But a part of the market day, nowadays it's just the parking in front of some supermarkets. We're adding some planters with flowers in them, and we're going to do some other general detailing. We're starting on the second residential area out of 4, and as nothing else is really happening, I think it's time for a nice story time. By the way, I still don't have any name for both of the towns, so leave a name in the comments. But this town used to be just like all the other small towns in the region. Okay, we've only built 1 so far, but we're going to build more. Small settlements with a lot of farmland around them. But because this one was pretty central and across the main road, this slowly became the center part of this region. I don't mean the Erstendorf region or just the entire region alongside of the river, I mean a separate farmland region that we're now starting to build. So as I said, slowly this town started to grow, especially due to this being kind of in the middle and markets being held over here. It became bigger and bigger until it was about the same size as Erstendorf. And as Erstendorf had really reached its limits of growth, this town had all the space to expand. But then the railway came. Because of the big height difference to get to this town, there was no station in this town, so lots of passengers kind of forgot about this town, and food was preferred to be bought from places that were easy accessible by train, and then especially the flat area that I talked about in the first few episodes. So after the railway was built, Erstendorf and the other towns alongside of the river kept on getting richer, and this town didn't really process. They still produced a lot of food, but it wasn't economically growing as fast as the other towns. And then the highway came, and that was the final big hit for this town. Because of that, the old main road that sometimes brought in tourists or even recognition to their town, it was gone. Everyone was using the highway. At first, everyone thought that was a positive thing, because there was less traffic, so the town would be less busy. And if you would live on that main road, you wouldn't have cars passing you every few seconds. But then the economic change really started to begin. There barely was any tourism, because towns as Erstendorf and Boorzee and other towns alongside the river were way more touristic. Farming was harder and harder because big companies took over the market with high-tech equipment and big areas with good accessibility, so this town really started to fall down. At some point they got subsidized by the government, so not everything would go down in ashes, and the economy started growing a little bit more. Part of the deal was that they would also help the smaller towns around also getting up again. So that is why these towns are not fully abandoned, but they are really rural and not as rich as towns as Erstendorf. So yeah, that was the story of this town that hasn't gotten a name yet. Also, the reason that you don't see any medieval strategic position or anything is because in the Middle Ages, this was just a settlement of maybe 3 or 4 houses. Because only in the late Middle Ages, this town really started to become larger than its surrounding towns. This town also never had any problems with people from the flat area wanting to take over their town, because they are just too far away in the hills and until the late Middle Ages kind of lived their own life. Maybe one little hint for the name ideas. I could technically build a rock formation on the one hill that still will be forested on the other side of this town. So maybe something with Stein would be cool. I don't know, it's up to you, but I'm just giving my ideas. So over here you saw me build a little cul-de-sac thing. It's not really a cul-de-sac because it's not round, but it's a dead-end road with a wider part at the end. We're now going to detail up this last quarter of the residential part of the town, and then we're going to do some farmland detailing. We are coming to the end of this episode. I'm glad to be back after 3 weeks of not uploading or something. I'll try to get the weekly uploads back up again. And yeah, this was a somewhat longer video than normal. Let me know what you think of that, and let me know some good names for the 2 towns that you built today. I hope you also like that we are proceeding a bit faster in comparison to the first few episodes. And yeah, if you liked it, make sure to subscribe. It would really help me out, and then I'll see you in the next one.